All right, and it seems like there is stigma around sex work, about being a person that has done sex work,
Yes.
and that's probably because of the harm that one causes, which is why it is a crime, so that people know that you've done this to folks.
Right. Yes. Yeah. No, stigma is actually one of the biggest issues that people face. A lot of times people will cite statistics and be like, sex workers have, high rates of PTSD, or sex workers are have high rates of facing physical violence. Right. How many times do we hear about a story about a serial killer and the victims were almost all sex workers, if not entirely made up of sex workers? And people will point to the industry and say that the industry is the problem. I would actually argue that the stigma itself is the problem, because we have created an environment that encourages people to be dismissive of the humanity of people in the industry. We have created a society that tells predators it's okay to go after this particular demographic of people because they aren't as deserving of rights and dignity as the rest of us. We've created a society where people who are in the industry, if they have been harmed, are basically mocked and ridiculed if they come forward, right? How many times have we heard the joke about like, oh, is it sexual assault or is it robbery? And where basically, dead hooker in the trunk of a car is sort of like a running trope in a lot of movies and cinema that we consume. So we really have a society that has encouraged people to be very dismissive and oftentimes outright abusive towards people in the industry. And then we wonder why those people tend to be overly represented as victims. That's why. So really what we need to tackle is the stigma. And if we start talking about how people in the industry are humans who deserve dignity, who deserve respect, who deserve safety, who deserve rights, I think that a lot of the violence that's faced by these people is going to start going away. And I think like a great example of this, just in recent news, is the Ice Poseidon situation, right?
Yeah.
Where he hired someone, an escort, to come to his room, was filming her, most likely it seems without consent, had more men hiding in a room off camera that she didn't know were there, as some sort of prank, I'm being told. I'm not sure what the punchline is. A bunch of strange men are coming out into a room where you're engaged in, adult activity with someone. That doesn't sound funny. That sounds terrible. It sounds traumatizing. When she tried to leave, he tried to block the door to prevent her from leaving.
We've seen that before.
We've seen that before. And if we had a society where it was assumed that that was a bad thing to do to somebody, even if they're in this industry, we would see a lot less of that behavior. But, we see it all the time. Like, for example, Julie Bindel, who is a feminist who just put out an article the other day, was literally said, sex workers cease to be humans. Cease to be humans.
And what is that police report thing that's common?
It's called NHI, which stands for No Humans Involved, which is something that police say when they come to cases of a sex worker who has been murdered or assaulted. There have been times when it's actually put on paperwork. Police themselves have admitted to using this term. And if you're walking into a situation where you're already saying no humans involved because someone is a sex worker, if you're walking into a situation where you're straight up saying, these women cease to be human, how can you expect the rest of society to treat them with dignity and respect or encourage their safety, right? So the stigma is really what is feeding this, because a lot of people have moral issues around the idea of sex work as an industry. They're opposed to it because they themselves wouldn't do it, or they think it's inappropriate, or they think it's sad or disappointing if you're in this industry. They've basically translated that sort of idea that you're, you should be painted with the red scarlet letter A. You're a perpetual sinner if you've ever been in the industry, but all that does is that A doesn't stop you. All that A does really is essentially make you a target for predators, right? That's what the ultimate outcome is. And I think that's the part that we need to be talking about. If you talk about any other group in a dehumanizing way, right, we can't be shocked when that group gets targeted for violence. That's just common sense. So we really got to talk about the stigma that is tied to this industry and how we can start alleviating that stigma. And by doing that, start creating more safety for everyone in it.